Hello everyone. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Let's see over here. Hello Dan, how are you doing? Where are you joining from? So if you are joining this live stream, go ahead and introduce yourself in the YouTube chat. We'll be starting in a few minutes. Hello from Ukraine. So Philip is from Ukraine. Well, welcome Philip. Dan is from Bay Area, California. Nice, very nice. I'm sure the weather in the Bay Area will be really nice. I'm in Houston and, well, you know, it's around like 90 Fahrenheit. Then we have Gorilla Dev joining from Chicago. All right. Jan joining from Nigeria. Jeff joining from Nigeria. Saktival from India. Wow. That's really good, everyone. Thank you for joining. We'll be starting in a few more minutes. But yeah, if you do have any questions you want to ask during, I'll present you, since there are so many different architectures, so I'll just present you one of them and then we can, talk about the other ones later on. But I'll show you something different. All right. All right, then we have from someone from Turkey. I cannot pronounce your name. Enik. It's like a different letters, I guess. From Turkey. Great. I'm from Houston, Texas, by the way. Hot and humid Houston, always hot. All right. All right, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. Well, first of all, thank you everyone for joining. And a little bit about myself. So this is SwiftUI Architecture. Let me close this one up. My website is azamsharp.com. This is where I write my articles. You can see my articles over here. I create my videos, which are on YouTube. I also run my own website, which is azamsharp.school, where I publish my courses. I do workshops. I do one-on-one coaching over there. And, there are close to maybe 200 hours of content on Azam Sharp School. There are courses on machine learning, foundation models, SwiftUI architecture, Skip, Vapor, anything you can basically imagine about iOS. There will be a course for that. There are subscription plans that can allow you to enroll in the course. And one of the things that I recently added is with a subscription plan, you get to access the workshops, the live workshop for free. And the workshop is coming up on October 24th, next month. That will be 3-hour workshop on Swift data. So anyway, you can check out this website if you want to, that's fine. And I host these YouTube live session, every couple of weeks. I'll try to do every week, but every couple of weeks, okay? Sorry, I'm a little bit under the weather, but that's okay. All right. So what we're going to be talking about will be SwiftUI Architecture, okay? And there's so many different architectures that you can use. Like there's obviously MVVM that people use. Then there's MV, there is TCA, there's Viper, there is MVC. There's so many different things that people can use. What I want to cover, at least in this particular lecture, is one of the architectures that are inspired from React development. And that is known as the container presenter pattern. Container presenter pattern. Now keep in mind that I am not saying at any point that you should always use container presenter pattern. The architecture is dictated by the type of application that you're building. So if you think that this will be a good architecture for the type of app that you're building, then at least try it out. The whole idea between container presenter is you have a container component which loads the data, which is this one. Well, I guess if I just play the video over here, the container component is kind of like a parent component that loads the data, and it simply then passes down the data to the presenter component. All right. So that is a kind of like a natural flow in React, and we can actually utilize this, and we can create this kind of flow also for SwiftUI applications. So let me actually implement something so that you will have a little bit better idea. So let me see if we have a container pattern over here, container components. So over here you can actually see, this is all React, by the way, and it's always a good idea to look at these, look at React code also and Flutter also, so you can get inspiration and maybe get some ideas, and then you can use it. So this one component in React called dog images container, it loads the data right there, and then I don't know what's going on with the scrolling. Let me see over here. Oh, there we go. And then it passes down to this component called dog images. That's called the presentational component. Okay. One important thing is that they're just doing the load part right inside the view itself or the component itself. So how can we do this? All right. If we want to build this something similar, how can we do this? Well, first of all, let's say that if I want to display products, I can go to this fake store API. I'll share the link in the chat. And in this fake store API, it's obviously fake. So all the products, all the things that we are going to get are fake, but it also has authentication, users, category filtering, a lot of different things you can do with the fake store API. All right. So we're going to be using that. So if I want to display the products on my screen, what can I do? Now I know that by default everyone is going to go and start implementing the MVVM pattern, but over here I'm showing you something a little bit different. All right. So if I want to display a list of products or communicate with the server, and my app is client to server application, meaning that whatever the server is returning, I just want to display it on the screen and I want to interact with the server also. The code is not visible? Well, that is interesting. Can you share your screen? I thought my screen was shared. And now I'm completely blanking out as how to share the screen. Sorry about that. Screen, media source, video capture device. Why is it like that? I thought it should be capturing the screen. Screen capture? Okay. This one? Can you see the screen now in a second? Wow, I did all of that and the screen wasn't even sharing. Oh man. Can you see the whole screen? Can anyone confirm? Can they see the whole screen or what's going on? I don't know what's going on over here. I think it's only sharing kind of like a part of the screen. Okay, let's close that. Let me add another Mac OS screen capture. Yes. Display capture, window capture, I think display capture, studio display. It should be capturing the whole screen. Show cursor, something. Okay. Can anyone confirm if they can see the whole screen? You can write in the chat if you can see the whole screen or not. I'm so sorry. I have no idea that it was not being shared because I didn't really change any settings. Can you see the whole screen, the code? No, you cannot. Well, I have no idea how to do that then. I don't really know why it's sharing only a very small part of the screen. I'm using, what am I using? OBS. Let me see actually. Yeah, you can maybe guide me. Well, like what am I supposed to do over here? I'll say close it. So I'll add a Mac OS screen capture, create a new one, and when I say okay, it just shares this only part of the screen, which is kind of like a weird thing. I'm not sure what can I do. Any ideas, anyone? Why is it only sharing part of the screen? Properties, add source. I mean, that is what I want to share. Hide OBS from capture. Display capture, window capture? No. Application capture. Bug in macOS 26. I am not using macOS 26. Application capture. Application I want to capture is Xcode. Still, it's kind of like zoomed in. Okay, let me see. Well, that's not going to work because now the font will be so small you won't be able to see what's going on, and I can see. I guess the source for the screen has some transformation applied. Source for the screen has some transformation applied. Okay, let me go ahead. So over here I have to add a macOS screen capture, I think, right? I mean, that's the only thing I can see. And then we say whatever the new thing is, make source visible. I don't know what that means, but let's say. and then it just transforms it into a weird thing, like, let me move over there. Display capture, studio display, not that, studio display, if you right click the source for the screen, maybe that display, right click the source. If you right click the source of the screen, maybe the transformation option has something applied. Transformation, where's the transformation? Okay, here we go. Fit to screen. Okay, can you see now the whole screen probably? I am so sorry, okay, in a minute. Okay, now I think you can see the whole screen, right? Hopefully. Let me know. Oh, thank God. Okay, sorry about that. Well, that took forever. Okay, I'll remember that then. Sorry about that. I had no idea how that happened. I just used the same settings. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, let's continue then where we were. And thanks for helping. Okay, so what we want to do is to display a list of products on the screen, right? So what will be the most easiest way, the quickest way we can do that? Well, we need to create a struct for the product. Struct will have, this is just a DTO or the model that we are creating. Title and probably also the description. This is something that will be coming from the JSON. It will be identifiable and it will be also decodable. Okay. So if our idea is only to get the data from the server and put it on the screen, we can also create some sort of a HTTP client. And in that we can say fetch products, which can be an async throws function, and then it returns product. Now this is a very simple kind of HTTP client. Usually you would create a more of a generic client, which means that your generic client will be, it will work on all the types. But right now we're only focused on product, and that's it. So I'm just going to quickly go ahead and get the URL. So make sure that your HTTP client is nice and generic, but right now, just to save time, I'm just going to hard code everything. And we can say, so whatever your HTTP client is, maybe you already have a HTTP client that you can use, some sort of a HTTP client that you have developed before. It's going to get the data, we're going to get some data, we're going to get some response. We don't care about the response. And then we'll say JSON decoder dot decode to product dot self data, and then we just return it. Okay, so this is kind of like our basic HTTP client, but you can have more of a generic client. Okay, so now the question becomes that this is the view, and this view is like, okay, I need the data. And since we are trying to do something similar to what React does, a container presentation pattern, what we can do is we can expose our services, which is HTTP client, as an environment value. So I'll just go ahead and say environment values. And then I can go and expose this HTTP client. So it will be very similar to what React is doing. If you look at the React code that they have written, see, in the component, they are using the fetch API, which is already built into the browser, and they are getting the data, and then they're just displaying it, and that's it. So we can do that. Now, since we have injected our HTTP client in the environment value, we can actually get the HTTP client directly from the view. Now, keep in mind that this is for a specific kind of apps. I mean, if you're building an app where all you're doing is simply consuming an API, maybe it's a Pokemon API, maybe it's some sort of API you're consuming, and there's not really any business logic going on the client side because most of the stuff is on the server side. You're not really sharing data you are sharing data with different screens, but that's like one level deep, not in a different part of the SwiftUI tree node or the hierarchy, like not globally sharing the data. Then these kind of techniques and these kind of really simple architectures can definitely benefit you. Okay, so we are going and we are simply accessing HTTP client right inside our view. Now, once again, I want to be very clear. It's not going to work for every single kind of app. Okay. That's another really good question. So now the question is, do you recommend avoiding constructor injection altogether? Should we only use the environment for dependency injection? That's a really good question. So let me actually show you what the question actually means. It means that why can't we just do this? When we do this, we still have to pass it, right? I mean, that is the constructor injection. So I can go ahead and say that, HTTP client. And that is perfectly fine too. You know, I think it's a way of writing your code. If you want to do constructor injection, that is perfectly fine. The problem or the headache if you want to call it a headache that you're going to get is, what's going on? Why it's not refreshing? The headache you're going to get, HTTP in the call. Where's the HTTP in the call? Anyway, the problem that you're going to get is that if different screens or different views, they want also access to the HTTP client, then you need to inject it through the constructor, right? And you might say, well, that's not a big deal. I can just inject it through the constructor. Not a big deal. And that's perfectly fine too. If you're okay with it, that is perfectly fine. But SwiftUI especially already has a dependency injection or dependency management system built in. And that is through the use of environment, which is what we're using. Now, whatever you inject in the environment, whatever you put in the environment, you can only access inside the views, which what I'm doing, I'm accessing it inside the view. All right. So depending on your use case, if you have services, like I call this a service, then I personally inject it inside the environment. If I have some sort of a point, a source of truth, then I will use a different environment. Remember this one? Like let's say, plot C store, like an observable object. So I'll use that. But I would mostly use, or always probably use, the environment for dependency management, because it just makes my life a little bit easier. I don't have to pass around the plot C store or HTTP client to different views. I can just get it from the environment, you know. Now we don't have the plot C store over here or observable object, so we're simply using HTTP client. All right. Now HTTP client is going to fetch the stuff. Actually, one other thing I want to mention over here is sometimes what happens, and one of the complaints, since we're talking about this, one of the complaints of not using this or not using the environment object is if I forget to inject the environment object, then it will not give me a compile time error. It's going to give me a runtime error. And that's true. You know, if you forget to inject, you are going to get a runtime error. Especially, I think it's for environment object. Well, that's not really a big concern, because if it's going to give you a runtime error, you can quickly, 1 second, you can fix it. So I haven't been able to come up with any kind of a workflow where I forgot to inject the environment object, which I have, and not catch it 5 seconds later, right? So I'm not sure that what kind of a workflow you're using where you forget to inject the environment object and then you don't even test your code, you just deploy it. So I'm not sure how you would come up with that solution. Even if somebody accidentally removed the environment object for some weird reason, I mean, you still have to test your app before you push it to production, right? So either you're going to catch it, the person who is implementing the feature, that person is going to catch it. Your test hopefully is going to catch it, end-to-end test. If you don't have end-to-end test, your QA team is going to catch it. So there's so many different, items or so many different, layers that can catch that issue. And just because that, oh, I forgot to inject it, so it's going to get a runtime error, I think you're going to get a big problem. Then the question is, when you have a big app and someone adds to one view and don't review the previews, only review the app running. Yeah, even if you have a big app, then you should have some sort of a QA team to do that. And I think this is a made-up problem. This is simply a made-up problem that people, I think in their mind, they have made it up, but it never really happens in the real world. Or even if it happens in the real world, they're able to fix it in like 5 seconds. So I think that's a made-up problem, because the benefit that you get from putting stuff in the environment far outweighs than passing it again and again and again and again to your 30 different views. I mean, just try it out. Pass your HTTP client to 30 different screens, and then you'll be like, oh God, I don't want to do this anymore. Why am I doing this? All right. So definitely try it out. And yeah, you may forget to inject it, but you will find it in 5 seconds. All right. So we got the HTTP client. And so this kind of architecture that I'm using right now, the content view is the only view that's kind of responsible for getting a list of products. So list of products means that the question is, I meant that previews can also fail, not only the top, the runtime, that's something you need to account for. Yeah, the previews can also fail, absolutely, right? And the previews is failing, then then you're getting a live view of what's going on. I'm sure that people who do complain about that, then their comeback would be, well, I don't really use previews, it never works. So there you go. All right, private var products. Okay, so in this particular architecture that I'm using, the content view is the only view that is interested in displaying the products. So that's why I have a state property over here, which is basically showing you the products, or which is representing the products. Let's go ahead and perform this action. So products, and we're just displaying the product, right? So product in product.title. But it's not going to display anything because we haven't really made the call yet. So in the task modifier, we can say HTTP client dot fetch products. It's going to give me products. I can assign it back to the products, and I can do the catch and all that stuff. In the catch, make sure to display it on the screen and not on the console, what I'm doing. And there you go. That's all the code that I needed to fetch the products and then display it. All right, so I think this is really nice kind of architecture for very specific kind of apps where the products is not really being shared by some other 30 different views. It's not a global state, it's a local state, which is fine, right? All the business logic is on the server side. So everything is going on the server. So if you want to perform any sorting, you have to make a request to the server and get it sorted. If you want to sort it on the client, then you can just write the code in the view itself. If you want to test the code for sorting on the client side, then you can extract it out into a view state and then perform those actions. But usually I think when you are dealing with a client server apps, the sorting part takes on the server, and then the sorted result is sent from the server. Okay, so this is a nice, simple container presentation pattern, which is used since 2013 in React, which you can also use for specific kind of apps in SwiftUI. All right. Now we can make this a little bit better. Right now, when the call goes to the server, we are not displaying that we are loading something. It also does not account for what if there are no products. It also doesn't account for if there was a, well, kind of like a problem loading with the products. So what can we do that there? So one of the ways that we can actually do that is by creating, and there are again multiple different ways, loading states. And a loading state is going to represent different states of this particular view. So we can have a loading state called loading, success. In success, you will have a list of products because that's what we're after, right? So we will have product. And then we have failure also, which is probably an error. We can also create an instance or a state variable for the loading state. Loading state, blah, 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 loading. By default, it will be loading. Because in most of the apps, I mean, right now it's loading really quickly, but maybe you're in an environment outside somewhere where you have a very, slow connection. So you want to show that your products are being loaded. All right. So let's rewrite this thing and see that how that comes into account. I can perform a switch on the loading state. By default, it's loading. So over here, we can display our loading. Load. Can't really type. What's going on? Loading. Okay. And success, we're going to get the products. Error, we're going to get the error. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Now I'm going to just type the code over here, and then we can refactor it later on. I think it's going to be the same code, like product in, but it might be a good idea to refactor this into a different control. And for over here, we can say something like this. Okay, so now you can see we use kind of like this loading state, which is a enum, and currently it's just saying that it's loading, right? It's not really saying that it's doing anything else. So why is that? Well, the reason is that we haven't even called our fetch products function. And we can try to call it in the progress view because that is where we want to load the products. So I can say HTTP client dot fetch products, and it's going to return products. Try await. Now you can actually create a helper function also if you want to. That will look much nicer also. If instead of doing all of that stuff over here, this part can be put into a helper function. Maybe we'll do that in the end, but let's see. So once we get the products, we can simply assign it to the loading state equals to success products. Oh boy, here we go, products. And there we go. So that part is done. See that? And all of this, you can move it into a helper function, which is already inside the view. You can call that function load products, fetch products. It doesn't really matter. I mean, we can add that function over here quickly. If you want, you can do that. Load products is fine, I guess. Don't know what's going on with my typing. Okay, there we go. We can put all of this stuff right here, and then inside over here we can just call load products. Load products. Not loading, load. Okay, so that we just moved it over here, but the idea is the same thing. All right. What about success over here? Well, once we have the success, we are displaying a list. But eventually, maybe this code gets a little bit more complicated. So it's always a good idea to extract out that list. So what should we call it? Product list view, which is a view, body, We're going to pass in, somebody's going to pass in the products, which is a list array of products. And then we can probably just display the list, this one. We can even go one step further and create a cell for this once it gets complicated. Right now it's not really complicated, so we can leave it there. Product, list view, products. All right. And if you have any question, please go ahead and you can type it on the YouTube chat. Error, yeah, whatever kind of a error that you are using, error view, maybe you have some sort of a fancy error view you have created, you can use that over there. Sometimes the products might be empty. I mean, there might not be any product. Maybe you selected a category and then that category doesn't really have any products. So maybe we can even check over here. If the products dot is empty, then we can display content unavailable view or anything. Maybe you have a custom view. No products. I don't know the system. Try again later. No, not try again later, but system, whatever you want to put it over here, heart, else, something like that. All right. Yeah, so any questions with this approach? So I think one of the things that I found, I mean, this is fine for building app which can display the data, but one of the challenges that you will have is, what if you wanted to add a new product from a different screen? Like maybe you have a modal or a sheet and you wanted to add a product. How would you do that? But before that, let me first ask this, if anyone has any, so here we go, we have a question. So here we are relying on the HTTP response as our data model. What happens if we have Swift data or core data? The entity should be our source of truth and the other just DTO. So if you are getting information, so relying on HTTP, what happens if we have Swift data? So basically you're saying that if instead of using HTTP client because we are getting the data from the server, what if we were getting the data from the Swift data? So other than the DTO, is that the question? Like so basically replace the HTTP client with Swift data or core data. All right. Yeah, I think if you're using Swift data then and not HTTP client, then you will. Okay, so from a local database, yes. So if you're using local database and you obviously don't need the HTTP client part, you are simply going to get the data. With Swift data, it's a little bit different. Let me actually show you, because in Swift data, I tend to follow the architecture which is more similar to active record pattern, which is very common in Ruby on Rails. All right, so I'll have this article. That is how I personally use Swift data. There we go. Robin is saying in line number 57, you can set the loading state to failure. Yes, line number 57, yes, you are 100% correct. This is where you can set the loading state to failure and you can pass in the error. Nice, there we go. All right. Okay, now, so this architecture is, you can see that it's just simple, right? And most of the time what we're doing is we are getting information from the server, we're displaying it. We're adding information to the server, we are sorting from the server, we are searching and all those. We're making requests to the server and we're getting some response which we displayed on the screen. But what happens if we wanted to add a new product, right? So if I want to add a new product, how will that work? Well, let me first go ahead and wrap this with a navigation stack because I want to add a toolbar. And if I want to add a toolbar, I probably have to wrap all of this with something. There we go. Toolbar, toolbar, toolbar content, placement, let's say trailing. So I'm not doing anything, I'm just creating a toolbar, and I'll say add product. We're not really going to add a product to the server, we're just going to fake it. Okay, add product is presented equals to true. I'm just doing it a little bit quickly. Going to go in and create a sheet is presented. And this is where you can actually guide me that what can be different solutions for this case. All right. Okay, so is presented is fine. It's true now. And whenever it's true, we can actually open up a sheet. Is presented, add product screen, which we don't have. So we'll have to build that. Let's go ahead and build the add product screen. Add product screen, which is a view, body, whatever, add product screen. Let's first see that if we can even show add product screen. Yeah, so add product screen shows up in a modal. What is the add product screen going to do? Well, it's going to add a product. And since it's a sheet, we eventually do want it to be dismissed. So I'm just going to go ahead and get the dismiss part of it. Dismiss and add product. And over here, add the product. Okay, so now it becomes interesting. All right. If I click on add product, it shows me the add product screen. I can click on add product. Obviously, it doesn't really do anything because we haven't really done anything. So currently, the products are only available in the content view, in the local state. That's a private state. And somehow the add product screen needs to update or add a product to the products. All right. Now the add product screen obviously is going to communicate with the server. It's going to make a request to the server. The server is going to return a product which will have an ID to it. And once we get the product, then we can add it to the products array. But we can't do that. The products is part of the local private state for content view, and it's only available inside the content view. So how can we allow the add product screen to add a product to the products? Any ideas? I mean, there are many different solutions for that. We can try to use binding. Okay, let's try that. What does that mean, binding? Well, this means that we can actually send the products as a binding. All right. So whenever I type this code, I automatically just feel weird just by typing this code because it just doesn't look nice. It just doesn't feel nice. Like we're passing the whole array of products to the add product screen so that the add product screen can add a product to it. It just feels so weird. I mean, even though if it works or not works, that's not the question. It just doesn't feel right. Products.append products, right? Not product. We need to create a product. So let's go ahead and create a product. New product equals to product, whatever, 12, new product, description, doesn't really matter. There we go. And let's call it new product. So even though the add product screen will be able to change the binding just by adding a new product, the content view is probably not going to get refreshed. Let's go ahead and do that. Let me go ahead and say add product. I'm going to add a product. See that? The new product is never added over here because there's a switch over here that goes on to each of these cases. So now the question is, well, what do we have to do? So think about a solution. What can we do? I'm just going to edit this code to dismiss also. All right. We are passing the product as a binding, and then we are adding it to the binding. which means that it is telling the parent, which is a content view, that the binding has changed. But the problem with that is the switch over here, it's not really, being triggered at that point. So now the question is, well, what should we do? I mean, how would we solve this problem? Because even if I go and add a product, the new product is not added. See that, new product? I mean, we can change the name of the product if you want. Let's just call it baseball bat. Okay, that's a product that we're adding. Now there are certain solutions for this. None of them is good. One thing that we can do is I can go ahead and say on change, and whenever the products change, then go ahead and fire this. For this, the product has to be equatable or hashable, so we can do that also. I mean, we can go on a product and say, well, you are also hashable. Where is it? This one. But this particular closure is fired all the time. Like if I put an on change over here, you can see on change is fired. Well, I think this on change is looking a little weird. I think there's another one, right? Initial. You can also put initial to be false, like don't fire it initially. But what happens is that it will eventually fire when you, where is it? When you set the products right here. Well, not sorry, right here, right here. So it is going to get fired anyways, right? And that will fire the on change. So then the question is, well, it's going to get fired right now, and it will fire whenever you change it. Then it becomes repetitive, meaning you're just doing it again and again. Okay. So that's one solution, but that's not really a good solution for a couple of reasons. As I explained, I don't really like passing the whole array to to a different screen just to get updated. It just feels kind of weird, even though it may work, but it just feels kind of really weird. And then the on change, it is firing, well, whenever the products are set, which is right after when you're loading, which is right here. And then it's going to fire whenever you add a product or remove a product, which is fine, but it is still firing when you add a product or when you get all the products. So that solution, even though it may work, we may have to look for a different solution. So I think this is a question for all you. How would you solve this problem? I mean, I can show you the closure approach where you can use a closure, but how else can we solve this problem? We can try closure. Let's see. So what I can do is I can go to add product, and I can say on product added, or on product add, or whatever, on product add. Give me the product, and once you create the product, you just say on product add, and then you pass in the new product. And then the caller no longer has to pass in all of this stuff. The caller will get the new product, which they can add to, well, not even add, yeah, they can add, they have to add it to this, right? Products.append, new product. And I think they also have to set the state again. Products. This means that we don't really need the on change part. Okay. So now if I go add a product, I say add a product, you can see the baseball bat being added. All right. I mean, that's fine. I think if you want to use the closure approach, that is fine. And I think whenever you use this kind of a pattern, this becomes more of the biggest limitation or like a weird behavior. If the communication is between one screen back to another screen or just between two screens, then okay, you can do binding, you can do closure, and that's fine. You can do those things. You can use on-change events, whatever you want. But as soon as you go into a deeper hierarchy of the screens and you want to get the data refreshed in other screens because a change has happened, then this kind of architecture kind of makes it much more difficult because now you have to pass the data around. The other architecture, which probably I'll cover later on, which I call it MV pattern, is the one where you use environment objects and you use global state rather than local state. So over here we're using local state, right here. There's nothing really wrong with using local state. You can still use the local state if the view, if one view is the only one that is interested in those things, which in this case it is. I mean, there's only one view over here, content view, who's saying that, hey, I want to display the products. And yes, there are some other views like add product screen that can update the product, but displaying part is only done inside the content view and basically inside the product list view. All right. So you can definitely use this pattern for type of apps that are compatible with it. But if you are sharing data, data is being shared with a lot of different views and a different hierarchies of views, then it becomes very hard because you have to pass the data through the constructor dependency and you have to just pass it around, and that becomes super annoying. All right. So that is pretty much what I wanted to cover today, the container presentational pattern. This will be part of the book that I'm writing on SwiftUI Architecture. The book is still in work in progress. It's still going to take a while to finish the book. I've been writing it for, it's been a long time. So it's still a work in progress. So, but it's coming along, Yeah, any questions, anyone? And I will cover this particular pattern in the book also, I think using the similar examples. But again, keep in mind that there are patterns for everything, If I was building a very large application, actually large, I don't want to use the word large because that's often people use like large, so that's not going to work for large application. Well, that actually does work for large applications, all right? It's based on the type of application. So large is not a good word. The type, I think, is a good word because we can always look at React, and that's how React does it. And React didn't really had Redux for a very long time. It didn't really have the global state. And that is how they were passing the data. They would pass the data through callbacks to the parent, and then the parent will pass to the siblings. Now, obviously, in SwiftUI, we don't have to do that because we can just use global state. All right. So the question is, how do you handle scenarios like authentication for the HTTP client, token refresh? Would this be an abstraction? For token refresh and all that, that will be part of the HTTP client, which is right here. Okay. And the HTTP client, so for authentication, what I usually do is I create authentication controller. You can call authentication service, that's perfectly fine too. It will have a dependency on HTTP client like this. And then it will have obviously function like a login where you can pass in username and password. Once the login and whatever is successful, then you can actually call, what is that called? The keychain, and then save the token, something like that. And the login function can return you some sort of a response like true, false, or whatever response. And based on that response, you can navigate to the correct screen or show them the correct screen. Actually, it doesn't even have to do any response because you can probably access app storage from here, right? and you can say is authenticated, private var is authenticated, boolean false, and once you're authenticated, you can say authenticated true, and since this is part of the app storage, whenever you set authenticated to be true, then you can adjust your views, that you will no longer display the login view, you will display the dashboard view or whatever, or where you will take the user somewhere else, so you can actually do that. Actually, that's one of the things that I already covered. Let me make sure that if I can show it to you. Actually, probably I can go from here. So all of those things I covered in individual videos, authentication. So over here, which is a member-only video, Adam Sharp Pro member-only content, if I open this up. So this is individual videos. I mean, yeah, there's a huge course over here. You can see right there, there's a huge course. You can take that apart from other courses, but these are individual videos, and probably over here somewhere I talk about cache, login stuff or something. Oh, here we go. See that? Right there, there is how to implement JWT authentication in iOS with SwiftUI and Node.js, and I think it's also covered over here. This video, and this is the one that's actually taking up the Platzi store, is using the Platzi store, the fake store basically. So that covers all of that stuff. All right, but yeah, definitely try out Platzi store API. It's a really nice API, and it's a fake store, so you can you can work with it. It does have authentication URLs and all that stuff. So definitely check it out. All right. All right. Any other questions? So definitely try it out. I think that's a good thing about keeping an eye on React and Flutter. It's sometimes we can learn different patterns from those things that can benefit us also, because SwiftUI, Flutter, React, all of those things are just so similar, especially the React and SwiftUI so similar that we can learn and we can apply those things. All right. Like the navigation part, maybe I'll cover navigation someday. It's also it can be very similar to how React does it. So we can actually build those things. All right. All right, everyone. Any other questions? Let's go to the code over here. Yeah, so this is kind of like how I design my apps. Now, depending on the type of the app, if my app is just getting the data from the server and displaying it and that's it, and it doesn't have to be shared globally, yes, I will probably go with this kind of a pattern, like a container presentational pattern. If, however, I have products and I need to display products or access products in many different hierarchy or different parts of the not different parts of the app, then I don't want to pass around the data to different parts of the app. I'll just use environment object, right? And that will work great. And I mean, there are tons and tons and tons of articles that I've written on this subject. Let me go article. The best or the biggest one over here is this one. You can definitely check it out. All right. And you will see that if you try to use SwiftUI in a way that it is designed to be used, then it will make your life much easier. All right. So my only recommendation is to, even for you, just create a simple app, right? I mean, you don't have to use this pattern. I mean, you can try out the MV pattern that I talk about in the article, right? And I have a lot of videos and courses on MV pattern that you can use. You can try it out. You can see over here. Sometimes you just only need one observable object that can have the state for everything. Sometimes, if you're building a app that is the bounded context of the domain, it's not going to be like crazy complex. Then one observable object is maybe all you need. Yes, that file may become large, but it's still doing the job, the one and only one job, right? It's maintaining state for the whole app. But if your app is you're working in enterprise, then you can always have multiple models. Like I think, let me see the diagram. Yeah, this one. So each of these are observable objects. Now we haven't really covered this particular pattern in our live stream today. We covered more like a container presenter pattern, but this is something that I can actually show you next week, that how you can use this particular pattern. And this is where the SwiftUI is going these days, all right? I started talking about this, I don't even know how long ago. Let me go back to these articles. Okay, let's go with this one. Okay, look at the date of this article. 2022, I started talking about this, all right? And now fast forward, like 3 years or whatever, 3 years, let's just say 3 years, I can see a lot of people are at least trying different approaches. The one that I talked about, most of them are using the same approach with different name. They just call it services instead of stores. They call it something else. Some people call it controllers. That's fine. But now I see a lot of articles just popping up. A lot of people, even on Twitter, online videos, whatever, and they are saying that okay, when we were using MVVM, it was just getting super complicated because we were creating one view model for every screen, and we ended up with like 60 different view models because we had 60 different screens. So definitely try out this. It's much simpler, and sometimes it's not sometimes, but always simple solution is probably the most best solution. All right. It's easy to make things very complicated by adding like 30 different layers of abstraction, but it's extremely hard to think of a very simple solution. And I think that is what your goal should be, to keep things simple and try to use the power of SwiftUI framework to your advantage instead of fighting it all the time. So definitely, keep that in mind when you're building SwiftUI application. Try to use the powers of SwiftUI instead of fighting it. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming. And hey, check out azamsharp.school. As I mentioned, I'm doing a workshop on Swift data fundamentals. One thing I added recently is that the workshops are free for pro members. So if you become a pro member, you can just access these workshops. These are 3-hour long workshop. The next workshop is coming up on October 24th, which we are going to be covering Swift data architecture, relationships, testing, and even CloudKit integration. So I'll show you how you can create or how to write the correct Swift data architecture so that you don't get into situations like, let me show you. Just hold on a second. I will pull this up just to show you a recent post, which is a funny post on Reddit, which is this one. Here we go. Okay, where are you guys? Okay, let me see where you are. Oh, did I move everyone away? Oops. Oh yeah, this one. This is a funny one. 1 day ago. All right. So yeah, definitely attend my workshop so that you don't get into situations like this. All right. So I'll show you the architecture for Swift data, how Apple has designed, and how you should be using Swift data, so that you don't get into situations like the one that is being shown over here. All right, any other questions, anyone? All right, let me see over here. Okay. All right. Well, that is pretty much it for today then. Once again, everyone, thank you so much for coming, for attending, and we'll try to host these, try to host these every week or every bi-weekly basis. But again, thank you so much for attending. And if you don't have any questions, then we're gonna just wrap up and I will see you probably next week or in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.